Yeah.
Okay, great.
I've just done it. Carry on.
Thanks, Ruth. First off, welcome everybody. This is, I think, our third or fourth webinar in a sort of a sequence of things that we've been trying to get out to people, focused on sort of various aspects of retrofit. 2 months ago, we did a sort of a general retrofit presentation webinar. Tonight, the focus is very much solar and batteries. But just briefly, let me do a quick introduction to who's on the call. So firstly, I'm Peter Moss. I'm a PeCAN trustee. I think also on the call we have Bob Whitmarsh, who is a WinACC, so Winchester Action Against the Climate Crisis trustee. This is sort of a joint webinar between the two of us because we're working together on this super homes project. In addition, you've got Patricia, who's our project officer in Petersfield, and Ruth, who's our marketing officer, and Michael, who is going to be presenting on the core of the topic, the solar piece and the batteries. So briefly, who are PeCAN and WinACC? I think probably most of you know us, actually, to be fair, but just very, very briefly, WinACC was established in 2007 by the late Robert Hutchison. And WinACC works with communities and organisations across the Winchester district in a very similar way to the way we do in Petersfield, with Petersfield and surrounding villages. Both of us focus very much on achieving net zero in our areas. And we do that by trying to run projects in the local community and push for change with local government, national government, anywhere where we think there are barriers to actually sort of getting things done. One of those projects that the two of us are actually sort of working collectively on is this Super Homes project, which is very much around encouraging homeowners to think about their homes and the carbon footprint that their homes place on the environment. It's very much focused on helping you improve your energy efficiency, and we do a whole range of different things as a result of that. We've got some energy efficiency tips on our website. We've got information on funding and finance for measures that you can put in place, including sort of solar panels and batteries, but I have to say at the moment there isn't a lot that is available in terms of grants and subsidies from the government if you are in the able to pay category. And we run this project to actually encourage people to get retrofit plans done for their homes. What does that mean? Well, it means you get a sort of professional independent survey done, put together by a professional retrofit coordinator, which is specific to your home, completely independent, and will give you a good understanding as to what you might do to your home in order to actually improve its energy efficiency, but in particular, from our perspective, improve the carbon footprint. In that project, we're working very closely with the National Energy Foundation, who are also a charity, but much more of a nationwide charity. And they have a long history of actually working on homes and home efficiency in this domain. Between Winchester and ourselves, we cover quite a wide area actually for this particular project. We cover all of the Winchester district, all of East Hampshire, quite a bit of the Chichester district of West Sussex, and elements into Surrey as well. So we're covering a sort of a wide area and reaching out to as many communities and parish councils and trying to get the word out as widely as we can. Why the focus on housing? Because fundamentally 22 to 23% of your total emissions on average, that's true for anyone that lives in the Winchester and East Hants area, is coming from housing. And most, if not all of that, can probably be avoided if you do the right things to your home. 16 to 17% of that is actually going on gas or oil or LPG for heating primarily, obviously. And that's quite a high percentage, actually. Why is it so high? Because fundamentally, the heat you need to put into your home is directly related to the amount of heat you're losing from your home. And as the UK government has acknowledged, the UK has some of the most poorly insulated housing stock in Europe. Almost 60% of our private homes have substandard efficiency ratings of APCD or lower. And the National Housing Federation agrees that England's leaky homes are a bigger threat to the climate than all of its cars. So what's going to happen about it? Well, the Climate Change Committee, this body that is actually advising the government on what it needs to do, estimates that all rented and owned homes need to be raised to EPC band C or above at some point in the next few years. So we're anticipating that at some point the government is likely to regulate around actually getting homeowners to raise their EPC levels to probably band C and above, but it remains to be seen how far they're prepared to push this. So this may become a regulated requirement at some point if you want to sell your home or if you want to rent a home that you own out. But at the moment, it's strictly a voluntary measure. What does a retrofit entail? Well, loft insulation, wall insulation, floor insulation. There's a focus on windows and doors and sort of getting rid of drafts. Ventilation, because if you seal a house well, you also need to ventilate it appropriately. Replacing the heating system with an electric heating solution, heat pumps being the favored option, I think, now for almost all circumstances. And of course, if you're electrifying your heating and you are buying an electric car to replace your internal combustion engine car, then you're likely to end up using a lot more electricity. And yes, you can get that off the grid, but why wouldn't you take the opportunity to actually use your roof or maybe a part of your garden to actually put solar panels in, capture some of that electricity in batteries and then reuse it to power your home, to power your heating, to power your car, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the topic for today, how to get the most out of, I guess, the space that you have and the generation of electricity and then what you can do with it. Now, Michael, I haven't actually seen whether you've actually managed to sort of get your camera working or not, but I'm hoping so. Michael is our expert for tonight. Michael works for a company called Ecovolt Renewables and is an expert in this solar and battery space. I'm conscious that there's quite a few attendees on this call tonight, so I would ask you if you could to stay on mute while Michael's talking. If you've got questions, please post them in the chat room and we'll pick them up at the end of the conversation. Michael, over to you. Maybe start with an introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Thanks for the introduction. And yeah, I have got my camera working now, so all good.
Good.
Yeah, so yeah, my name's Michael Beckett, and yeah, I started Ecovolt Renewables quite recently, last year after graduating with a master's from the Centre of Alternative Technology in Sustainable sustainability and energy provision and demand management, and I'm also a qualified electrician. So I'm sort of cover all aspects of the sort of domestic and small scale solar. Yeah, hopefully this evening I can inform you a little bit on the process and on the more the domestic side and the framework that us MCS solar installers have to work within, and the methodology there, calculating the yield you get from your solar panels, and hopefully how you can use your energy effectively to make the most of it. It's a very wide ranging subject, therefore I probably won't get through anything, but hopefully we can pick up anything I've missed along the way on the questions at the end. So yeah, if we can have the first slide, please. So yeah, despite our rainy conditions this evening and the cloudy days, you can see by this radiation map that the UK is quite is well placed for solar, and particularly where we are in the south. It's yeah, it's next slide, please. Yeah, first of all, starting with basics, I'm sure most of you know, but there's two forms of solar you'll see on roofs, and this one isn't solar photovoltaic, this is solar thermal. So these are solar collectors, which are purely used to heat hot water in the home. And I just think it's important to clear that up. You have solar panels that generate electricity, and you have solar thermal, which is purely for hot water. In some applications, people have adapted this to heat their homes, but that's quite a niche, yeah, a niche system really. But yeah, so we'll go to the next slide. So solar panels were popular 15 years ago with the introduction with a feed-in tariff, and there was a big rush because the government subsidy was very, very generous, and those systems are kind of contained to about 4 kilowatts of peak power. And you can see this photo of some panels I installed a couple of weeks ago, and you can definitely see the difference between the older 10 or 12-year-old panels compared to the nice new black solar panels. And I think it's quite important to see the advances. The newer panels were a little bit bigger, but these panels in the foreground, I believe, are 220 watts, and the ones that I fitted are 415 watts. So really, you're looking per square meter of your roof, you can easily get 220 watts of power. Of course, that's it's important to differentiate between kilowatt peak and what you get, because when panels are tested to provide that figure 415 watts, I even was reading some data sheets on some panels that are available now which are even 450 watts, and this the same range of these panels. They're 2 meter high by 1.1 wide, but kilowatt peak is under lab conditions, and the solar panel obviously needs to be orientated to the sun to make the most of that, the irradiance, and and you get losses with heat. There's losses with the cables and the inverters and so on. So we go into that in a bit more detail if we can go to the next slide. And within solar PV, solar photovoltaic, there's a few different ways of, a few different forms of solar panels. The poly solar panels and the which are a cheaper version with an efficiency of about 15%. But these really any panel on your house now is going to be a monocrystalline panel, like in the top left slide, and then the thin film, which is probably going to become more common in the future, particularly around solar panels within windows and solar, on a camper van or a boat, or it's quite a versatile type of solar panel, but with a lower efficiency than monocrystalline. But for a carbon payback, very fast, because there's not much materials in these panels, and they can obviously be bent around curves and used for other applications where a monocrystalline panel might not be appropriate. And on the bottom left there, you might have seen this concentrated solar, which is I think in Spain, and there's a few places in the world, which basically the panels all around there are mirrors, and they concentrate the sun's energy up to a collector on the top of a mast there, which uses like a sodium type solution that creates steam and runs a turbine. So it's not something you're gonna have on a building. Next slide. So a few considerations before fitting solar panels, and if your roof or your land is appropriate, and clearly orientation and inclination is really important. Ideally facing due south, but really anything from 90 degrees of south is really worthwhile. And I've modeled some arrays on a building that we see later on with an east and west aspect, to see how that compares with a southern facing array. I thought it was quite interesting to really see the difference there. I mean, I think really for a domestic situation, if you've got a few different orientations, it gives you a better spread of energy throughout the day. The panels of my house are facing southeast, so really by 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm creating enough energy to cover the base load of my house, and by mid-morning, on a bright day, then my battery will be full, and but then that drops off mid-afternoon, and that's my generation done. So if you've got an east-west array, that's just perfect. So it's going to give you morning energy, and then see you with some energy as the sun drops down to the west. Obviously shading, near shading and far shading, chimneys, dormer windows, anything, but there's a way of minimizing that impact to your generation, which I'll go into a bit later when I'm talking about the systems. Condition of the roof, clearly you need to have rafters in good condition. Your tile covering needs to be of a certain standard, because it's not very cost effective in your system if you put your panels on and then have to remove them to fix a leak in a few years' time. And structural integrity of the roof is something your MCS installer would be able to check for you. And of course, your electricity demand in the house and what you're going to have in the future. Obviously, I always look at someone's last 12 months of bills to see what energy they're using, and see how much we can offset against the generation, the solar. But then really you have to ask yourself the question, are you going to have a heat pump in the future, or an EV, or how's that going to change in the future? And I think most people in domestic setting are probably restricted by roof size or ground array size, or indeed budget. But you know, really, it could pay you to have as bigger solar arrays as possible. And then in roof or on roof mounting, it's an in roof system there, which is integrated with some Veluxes. A lot of clients are very keen on in roof and think that solar panels are going to affect the look of their house. I mean, I'm a real advocate for solar, so I think solar panels look good on most houses. Yeah, that's my opinion. But you know, it's, if you're the homeowner and it's your money, I think it's really important that you think about how it's going to affect your roof, the look of your property, and the aesthetics. And then you may be thinking on roof system, but a ground mount system might be more appropriate, might get a better orientation, less shading. That's a big consideration. And the cable runs, you know, once you've installed quite a few systems, you can see that's the nicest way to run cables, place the inverter, make everything look as neat as possible. But as a homeowner, you know your home. If you have an installer come round to look at a job, it might be worth having a think yourself about where you'd like the inverter, where you think cables should be run, or the panels fitted. In next slide. So yeah, how a quick run and how a solar panel works. You obviously got the big nuclear reactor, which is the sun, and you have the photons that take 7 minutes to get from the sun to planet Earth, and then they obviously come down, hit the solar panel, and the photons there land on the N-type junction, and then they make the electrons that are in this boron doped junction move, and then it creates a circuit, and a solar PV panel generates in DC as opposed to AC, which you get on the grid. So it's effectively, it's like a battery, and when you have 10 panels connected on your roof, it's like a radio where you have several batteries. So each panel creates 30 volts. If you have 10 panels, you're going to have 300 volts. And then the inverter's job is to take that power and turn it into a usable power, which would be 230 volts nominal voltage and 50 hertz, and make it usable energy for your home. Next slide, please. So here's a typical installation here. That's on the top. There's your inverter that I described there. This is a grow watt system, and the box on the bottom is a 6.5 kilowatt hour battery. And then in between, you've got the two black dials there, isolators for the PV strings, and then two AC isolators of the red dials, which are either side of the meter, and then on the switch on the right is to isolate the battery. As with any new electrical installation, it falls under the regulations of BS 7671 that all electricians have to comply with, and there's obviously very strict guidelines, and that your installer has to work to make sure the installation's safe. And also, you know, you're looking for an array to last at least 25 years on your roof. So if all these steps are done correctly, properly, proper equipment, you know, your solar panels are up there, and it's maintenance free, apart from maybe giving them a wash annually. You really shouldn't have to have any maintenance on your panels. There's a lot with the feed-in tariff. There's over the last few years, there's been a lot of inverters that sort of come up to their 10-year lifespan, and people are having to change their inverters. I think now there's a lot of competition in the market, and inverters now are guaranteed for 10 years standard, and for even £200 or £300 you can get an extended warranty with some products, which would take that to 15 or 20 years. So, you know, it's a really good generation system that is low maintenance and shouldn't really need any more expenditure after your first capital outlay. And I forgot to say the other white box in the middle is your generation meter, which is an MCS requirement, which is probably a bit obsolete now with all the data that you can retrieve from your inverter. But it's a requirement that we're bound to, so we fit that. And the batteries, this particular inverter could have up to 4 batteries connected to it. It's called a hybrid inverter, which works. The battery is actually connects into your inverter, so the inverter's very good at converting the high voltage that I explained earlier, and putting out your 230 volts AC, but it also converts the voltage from the battery, which is about 55 volts, and converts that into usable energy. And within the inverter, you can have settings which you prioritize powering the house first, and then charging the battery after when the house is not using all the surplus. But this can be programmed. You can prioritize to first, prioritize the house second. There's really so many settings you can do these inverters. And another advantage of the batteries is you can charge them at night on a off-peak tariff. I personally have per kilowatt hour in the day, and 12 pence a kilowatt hour between 12:30 and 4:30 in the morning. So I set a timer and do what's called a false charge at night, and then I have the energy in the day. Probably when we're getting the longer days now, I probably won't need to do that, because the solar would take care of all my energy needs. But it's I know a lot of people are very interested in return on investment, and it's another justification for having a battery, that you can use it in that way, as in addition to storing the surplus energy from your solar array. Next slide, please. This is a schematic there. You've seen the actual physical photo of the installation, but this is a schematic, so you can see how the system's wired up. Obviously, solar panels on the left, they come into the DC isolator, the inverter, so DC coming into the inverter, and then AC electricity leaving the inverter through that other isolator and down through the generation meter, and then the inverter actually connects into your consumer unit or your fuse box. So it's perfect if there's a spare way to put another circuit breaker in there, because it has to be solely dedicated to your solar PV array. So it's otherwise there's we can add a second small consumer unit, or maybe replace the consumer unit if it's an older one and it's sort of come to the end of its life. Yeah, next slide, please. So as I was talking about before, you know, solar panel and indeed heat pump installers and are bound to the quality, most professional ones, should I say, are bound under certain consumer codes and the government's MCS, which is micro generation certification scheme. And you do have a certain amount of protection if you go within a certified installer. Like I said, any electrical installation needs to be signed off with under Part P and building control, which is a requirement under MCS. That's the NAPIT symbol there, which I'm a member of. And then REC and HICE, part of the consumer code, which monitor activities of companies and also provide deposit protection and other protection. And if you have a complaint with your installer, you can go to their registered consumer code and they will assist you in rectifying the problem. But really, I think MCS, it's such it's very, I say, it's very difficult to get MCS certification. You have to jump through a lot of hoops, have inspections, and then every year they want to see 3 of your installs and make sure that you're maintaining that standard. Obviously, you need to have the correct liability insurance in place, qualifications, and all the components that you install need to be MCS certified. So every mounting bracket, panel, obviously inverter, needs to be of a certain standard. So if you go with a MCS installer, products on Alibaba for a reduced rate and trying to sell them on as quality products. And it's also worth noting that you need an MCS certificate to be able to export under the Smart Export Guarantee. And the installer is required to have a quality management system and keep all records of everything going forward. Next slide, please. So the design process, the first of all, you can make contact with your installer, and it's quite likely that they will do a bit of a tabletop survey of your property at first, because you can see a lot from Google Earth, can zoom in down in the house, and I have software which can sort of model the house, and you can make a CAD model of the house, and then look at the irradiance, where the shading is in the house, the size of the roof. Then you can virtually place panels on the roof to see how many panels you're going to get there. And that's kind of the first step in producing a quote and a performance estimate of what you're going to receive from your solar panels. And from that, it depends on the complications around the install, but I think you can, most installers will probably be able to give you at least a budget figure remotely. And then if the client wants to take that further, the next thing would be a site survey and looking at any snags that might be with the install or possible upgrades, discussing optional extras and batteries and manufacturers, and try and assist you in making a decision, an informed decision. Then if the client wants to proceed, the next thing is that you have to apply for an export, to the DNO, which in this case is Scottish and Southern Electricity Network. They need to be notified of a solar installation that's been installed in a house. If the inverter's under 3.68 kilowatts, then that's just a notification process. But if the property wants to export more than 3.68 kilowatts, then you need to put in a G99 and then the DNO will come back and say, yeah, you can expect, they'll give you a figure of what you can export at peak. So I think typically for a single phase house, the maximum you're going to get, I believe it can go up to 18 kilowatts, but I haven't seen that. I think really it's anywhere between 3.68, maybe up to 12. You're getting a good export there. If you're lucky enough to have a 3-phase property, well, that's 3 times what a single phase house is. So you can export on a 3-phase 3 times 3.68, or apply for a G99 and most likely get 3 times more than your neighbour with a single phase property. I spoke about shading before, and some people might have heard of these devices. This is an optimizer which clips on the back of a panel, and this device has a little CPU in there, a little processor, and it would detect the voltage that is coming off your panel, and that's can help with shading. So if you have a chimney on your house and a certain time of the day casts a shadow across your array, this device will manage the power output of that panel and let the other panels bypass their energy at the full potential of that certain amount of irradiance, and it won't pull the power down of the whole string, as was the case several years ago before this was invented by a company called Solar Edge. So I probably need to explain that in another way. As I said before, solar panels are wired up in a string, and you saw in the diagram. Without an optimizer, if you have shading on one panel, your whole array is only as good as the power output from that one panel. So the optimizer will really optimize the power you're getting from your array. Yeah, there's now more manufacturers coming to the market, and these are coming down in price quite a lot. And also allows you on the monitoring platform to see which panels are producing what over the course of a year or a day. And if you have a problem with one panel, it's very easy to troubleshoot when you have optimizers and a monitoring system fitted, because you can instantly see if one panel is not working. So spoke before about the site survey. Obviously, this would be sort of a global view of your house. If there was any shading that wasn't picked up on the remote survey, looking at the integrity of the roof, looking at the condition of the roof, discussing with the client which way the cables are going to run, location of the inverters, and yeah, really sort of taking a deep dive into the install, so that when the installers arrive, and it's going to be a lot smoother for them, and they don't have any snags on that day. Certain houses, structural calculations are on the roof. If you have trusses, with the rule, there's a rule of thumb: if you're not increasing the roof weight by more than 15%, then it's most likely there won't be a problem. We won't need a structural engineer. If certain types, and I think I have a slide on the different types of roofs, you might need to get a structural engineer to run some calculations. There's also a solar array is a dynamic load. It's not the weight pressing down on your roof. A panel is about 20 kilograms, and the roof mounts and everything probably come to 25 kilograms per panel. But also you have wind lift, and snow load is a possibility, probably not so much in the south of England, but nevertheless, it needs to be accounted for that if you had snow build up on your array, it would increase the load more than just the panels itself. I've got some roof hooks, a roof hook here, which is the device, your rail onto your roof, and this goes. You slide the panel up on your roof, and that exposes your rafters, and then this is just literally screwed down into your rafters like this, and then the rail, which looks similar to this, bolts onto the top of your roof hook, and the panels onto that. Different roofs require different techniques. A clay roof, you would also substitute the tile underneath this hook with something called a hook stop, which allows, if the panel's any movement in the panel, it doesn't crack your clay tile. A slate roof requires a lot of finesse to make a nice installation, because slate tiles are only about 6 mil thick and they break very easily. So you would actually substitute the tile with a rubber tile that comes over the top, because if the roof hook hit a traditional slate tile, it would just crack it and you'd have water coming in. Concrete tiles are probably the easiest for the installer to fit, because concrete tiles are very, very solid and don't break very easily. So that's a good scenario for a roofer or a solar installer. I've got some other bolts here. This you could use for a similar if you had a stable block or a shed that could take the weight. This screw goes down into the joist underneath, and this big rubber grommet seals on the roof. There's numerous fittings that I could show you, but yeah, there's a system for most roofs. Flat roofs are a little bit more complicated with the structural calculations, because you can't always load them with solar panels. But you could, if you have a flat roof, you can have a ballasted system which just uses some bricks to hold the bracket down, and yeah, various different frames and solutions. I'm doing a design at the moment for a zinc roof, which is been a bit of an education. It's the first type, and of course you find a company that specializes in systems for zinc roofs, and it's actually a clamp that clamps down to the seam of the zinc roof, so no need to make any holes into the roof. So it's always worth, if you have an installer, it's always worth sort of quizzing them on roofing systems, and a little search on the internet at poorly fitted solar panels. If you see tiles that are lifting up over the roof hook, that's not right. If they really need to notch the tile so the tile sits nicely back as it was before, there's no excuse for accepting any poor workmanship on your roof. Like I said, your solar array needs to last at least 25 years. So if it doesn't look right, then it most likely it isn't right, and you need to make sure when your installer leaves that things are as they should be. And also when your system's commissioned, there's a number of documents that need to be handed over. The schematic, which you saw before, should be designed particularly for your installation. And also the warranties, the manuals, and your electrical sign-off certificates. And yeah, it's and obviously you need to have the app installed on your phone or your computer, and yeah, you need to there's probably a at least 20 minutes or half an hour of training in how to manage your app. And yeah, I don't know if that's probably there's the next slide. I don't know how am I doing for time?
I think you're doing fine, to be honest.
Okay.
How many more slides have you got?
Not many, maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah, fine, perfect. Okay, and then we'll break for questions.
Okay. So this is some path diagram, which is used for shading. And like I say, a lot of really industry relies very much on computer modeling for shading, which the software they use should run on the MCS methodology. But it's always quite good. I've got this this little tool here which has a compass, and you look through this at the direction your array is pointing, and this corresponds to this slide. Because if you have shading, in order to make an assumption of an estimate of how much shading and how much that's going to affect your output, you hold this up here, and anywhere you've got shading, you get a whiteboard marker and you put a tick in that square, and then that you can put that on there. That will give you a figure which you put into the equation, and that will affect your that will obviously be useful in or essential really in calculating your performance of your solar array. And if you've got arrays on different roofs, you may find that one roof doesn't have shading, one does. Is it worth putting some panels on the roof that does have some shading? Really, that should all be calculated separately, so you can make an assumption of where you want to put your panels. Next slide, please. And this is if I've been talking about the MCS a lot, and if you are considering having solar panels, it's really worthwhile taking a look at the MCS website, because all installers have to follow the methodology, the method behind the MCS, and how the performance is calculated. And there's some real key documents there, and it's worthwhile having a read through them, because then you just understand the process a little bit more, and maybe you can ask your installer some pointed questions to make sure they're going to follow the process correctly. This is I spoke before, a truss roof is generally good to go, and then some other types of roofs there you really should be contacting a structural engineer. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's an equation there. That's the equation that's used to calculate the output, the kilowatt peak of your array, the KK, which is where you are in the zone in the country, and then that's times by the shading factor, which I just explained. And then it's important to know that if you have a 400 watt panel on your roof, that it's not always going to be generating 400 watts. It's yeah, far from it really, unfortunately. But when you've got 10 hours of sunshine on that panel, then you're always going to get some export from it so while you're not getting 100%, you're still generating most of the time when the sun's up. Yeah, next slide, please. When you're purchasing, or when you're thinking about accepting a quote, you should be given the data sheets for all everything in your array. So data sheet for the panel, data sheet for the inverter, for the batteries, for the mounting system, so you know what you're buying, and you can obviously check. I mean, it's same as buying a car, that you really have to do your research. And these are the power curves on from a solar panel data sheet. And you can see there on the graph on the left shows the watts per meter squared, and you can see how the voltage doesn't vary very much, but you can see how the amps increases as you get more to as you get closer to 1,000 watts per meter squared. I would say on a dull day this time of year, you're probably maybe getting between 200 or 250 watts per meter squared, and then in the summer in this part of the country you'd probably get over 1,000 watts per meter squared at peak, when the if you're facing directly to the sun. But obviously that watts per meter squares that changes throughout the day as the cloud passes by the sun, or the sun moves in the sky to be not as direct onto your panels. And that's another power voltage curve on the right there. If we have time, we can look at a data sheet and I can explain a little bit more, but let's move and see what I've got on the next slide. Okay, so I thought I'd do some modeling, some calculations out of interest here. So I did a 4 kilowatt array here on a south facing roof, absolute optimal in Petersfield, optimal conditions, 36 or 45 degrees facing south. And if you put 4 kilowatts on your roof, you get an estimated annual output of 4,072 kilowatt hours a year. And you can do some maths if you look on your bill and how much you pay for a kilowatt hour, and then you can times that 4,072 and you can work out how much energy and monetary value that you would produce. However, you're not always going to use all your energy. Some of your energy is going to be exported onto the grid, and it's kind of unavoidable. I did install an array recently on a very large house with an indoor swimming pool on a nice stable block, and I don't know if that house would ever export what's put on. So I think I worked out a return on investment of about 5 years on that house. But typically, if you adapt your energy use to you setting the dishwasher, the washing machine, you run things when you got an excess of energy, you're going to have a lot faster financial payback. And really, even if you don't have solar panels, the carbon intensity of the grid changes over the course of the day, at night, and that's why you can get these off-peak tariffs, because there's not so much energy demand at night, and as a result of that, quite often that energy is just being produced by wind and nuclear. It's very low carbon per grams. But I think I looked this week when it was windy, it was down to 70 grams of carbon per kilowatt hour. But if you're on a 6 o'clock on a winter's evening where there's no solar and no wind, it can go up to 400 grams kilowatt hour, probably even more than that. But the grid is decarbonising with the more and more wind and solar has been added. That carbon intensity of the grid is reducing year on year. So really, a lot of people do focus. It's a significant investment to put panels on your roof, but even if the power is going out onto the grid under the smart export guarantee, it doesn't really pay you that much. I mean, typically that's about 4.5 pence per kilowatt hour, and when you're buying that in for 32 pence a kilowatt hour, there's a massive difference between export and import. But you are doing your bit for the environment because you're decarbonising the grid. And then I did another calculation here with a with a house, same location, with 2 kilowatts on an east roof and 2 kilowatts on the west roof. And you can see we got 3,112 kilowatt hours a year from that dual aspect. But what's important to understand is you're getting a better spread of energy throughout the day. So while you're getting almost 20%, 25% less energy, you might be using all that energy because you've got it first thing in the morning when you put the kettle on, and when you're cooking a breakfast, and at night when you might be consuming more, or if you've got an EV and that's plugged in when you get home from work, then maybe that evening sun is really going to benefit you. Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so I did some modeling here with the battery. I don't know the previous slide. I think under the method of the MCS, it shows grid independent self-sufficiency PV only. It's only 24% we've got there, and I've got Zoom in front of this slide and the other one. Can we just go back to the previous slide a sec? Yeah, and the east-west, I didn't have a self-consumption. Okay, back to the next one. But you see that figure under the method of the MCS, if you're out during the day and you're at work, well, maybe your house on its base load with powering the fridges and the freezers and a few things, your appliances on standby, and you don't really need the energy in the day. So if we go to the next slide again, we can see how having a battery affects that self-consumption. So that's the same solar array with a 4.7 kilowatt hour battery, and the self-consumption there is 2,321 kilowatt hours and 60% self-sufficiency from the grid. So if you added some more batteries, you're going to improve that self-sufficiency from the grid, and yeah, you're going to store more energy. And it's also, if you're storing energy when you don't need it, it also buffers when you put the kettle on, which is a high demand. It's not just about having energy in the evening or at night. It buffers your energy over the day when your demand increases and decreases. And so that figure's gone up to 60% there. But you can maximize. That's probably more of a worst case scenario if you're intelligent with your energy use, and you can delay doing your washing to the next day, or you can, set your hot water immersion heater to be on when you've got solar. You're going to increase that figure. Or if you've got an EV, you probably need more energy than you're going to produce, and so you can charge your EV battery. And then the next slide. And then I model the same. So it's important to say that all these are all the same arrays. And I think I added another battery on this one. So we've got 9.4 kilowatt hour battery, and that's under the MCS method. That's saying that you've got now 72% independency from the grid. So that's, I would say it's quite a small array as well. 4 kilowatts peak of panels going into a 3.6 kilowatt inverter. That's maybe up to 10 panels there really. A lot of people are trying to fit more panels, but obviously you're constrained by that, and not everyone has a huge big roof. But obviously more panels, bigger battery. It's really difficult to try and pin down exactly how much you're going to use, because it just changes year on year. If you go on holiday for 2 weeks in July, then clearly you're not going to need much energy then. So it's it's a guide. It's a guide, I suppose, to how much energy you're going to benefit and you return investment. Next slide, please. I think that's come to the end of my. Okay. So, in addition to batteries, there's a couple of My Energy devices. They're a British company that I really like, based up in Lancashire, and they invented the first smart charger, EV charger, which is there on the right, which is a solar diverter because it has different modes, which can use your excess solar energy and divert it into your EV. An EV typically needs 1.4 kilowatts to activate the charger. So this charger, if your solar it says a device on your next to your meter, and if it sees power going onto the grid, it will switch your EV charger on automatically. And also, I personally have one of these, and I have it set to 12:30 to 4:30. So if the solar hasn't finished charging the battery in the day, it will then charge it on the off-peak rate at night. So it's a financial gain there, but also lower carbon emissions, because, as I said previously, the carbon intensity is much lower on the grid in the middle of the night. And then the device on the left is called an eddy, which connects to your immersion heater and does the same thing. It's a little bit more versatile because that is able to ramp up if you have 100 watts, 200 watts, because of the nature of a resistive coil in your hot water tank, is able to drip feed a small amount of energy in there and bring your hot water temperature up. And they're really that's really a good product for storing and if your budget can't stretch to a battery, but you already have a hot water tank in your house, that could be a really good alternative over the high capital expenditure of a battery. And I think this might be one more slide as I got with the slides, and it is. Yeah, I mean, it's just to reiterate that the market's opening up, and there's a lot of manufacturers jumping into solar now and batteries, and where last year there was big supply chain issues of even getting a battery, there'd be a big waiting list. Now when I look at the wholesaler website, I'm seeing probably maybe a dozen companies producing batteries and different inverters, and I don't you probably most of the batteries are using the same cells that probably come from the same factory in China, I suspect, and it's just some good healthy competition in the market, and with that the price drops. And I don't know, Peter.
Thank you, Michael. So we had a series of questions coming in while you were talking. So why don't I just sort of run through some of those questions that came up. Give you a chance to have a drink as well. So the first one. So is there any danger to birds or bats from putting either solar on roofs or solar ground mounted?
Is there a danger? That's a good question. I haven't heard about the danger so much. I mean, there is a lot of people would opt to put bird netting around the outside of their panels if they're on the roof, to stop birds nesting under their panels. I had a job where I was moving a solar array not very far on a roof this week, just so he can squeeze some more panels in. And the panel's been up there 12 years. I removed them and there was no sign of any birds' nests under there, which I thought was interesting, that and all that time there weren't. But I think, again, it's not a huge expense to put bird netting. And the danger, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's any danger to birds or bats. Maybe someone else might know more about that than me.
Okay. So maybe we'll try and get back to you on that particular question. I think that was from Sarah. Planning permission. You I think mentioned it on one of the slides, but then sort of skipped over it. What sort of planning permission do you need typically?
Typically, planning permission, if you're in a listed building, if you're a conservation zone, you need planning permission to put panels on your roof. You can have up to 9 square meters of ground array without planning permission in your garden. 9 square meters isn't really very much, but the planning portal, South Downs National Park, wherever you live, I'd always advise anyone you can email them for free and they'll come back and give you an answer on whether you need planning permission. But generally in the South Downs National Park, you don't need planning permission unless you're in a listed building or in a conservation zone. But I think it's always your installer should be able to advise and should be able to check on that. But it's certainly pretty worth an email if you're unsure. I have assisted clients with getting planning permission from ground arrays within the South Downs National Park, and has managed to go through. Again, it's quite a bureaucratic process, but it is possible. And South Downs National Park obviously have a strategy for decarbonisation. So I think, everything has its place. And, as much as I'm an advocate for solar, some places it's not appropriate and other places it is. So I think it just needs a bit of forethought and a bit of planning. And like with anything.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. So you had a picture of an inverter and a battery, I think, mounted on a wall in what looked like a loft, actually. What sort of size are those typically? It was very hard to on the basis of
I fitted the inverters are, I think, about 600 millimeters wide by 550 high, 300 deep, and that battery, generally 6.5 kilowatt hour batteries, 850 high, 250 deep, and 400 wide. I have fitted the systems on a 1 meter by 1.2 meter board in a restricted zone, and I've got the inverter, the meter, the isolators, and then I managed to put the batteries to one side of those. The batteries can be wall mounted or they can be freestanding. So really you can generally you can probably make it work. The other consideration is the inverters and batteries do have parameters, temperature parameters, so they might work better in a garage or somewhere where the temperature doesn't get too high or too cold. I think off the top of my head though, the range is quite a lot. I think, and yeah, I from every device have something different on their data sheet, but it's another consideration. But it's a wide temperature range. I think it might even be just minus a few degrees up to 30 or 40 degrees, something more than 40. Anyway, check on your data sheet and see if your location is gonna stay within those temperature ranges.
Perfect. Okay, excellent. Then a couple of questions on sort of panels and the technology associated with them, I guess. So You said that the panels typically have a life expectancy of 25 years at least, right? And inverters typically for about 10 years. How much is the technology changing over that period of time? And is there a point at which it's worthwhile replacing them because the efficiency's got better, or do you stick with what you got and milk it for what you can?
I think like I said, the house I was working on this week, their panels which are 12 years old on a feed-in tariff, and no, they're still working. When the panels are normally the warranty, you would think after 20 years, and this is on the data sheet of the panel, they're guaranteed to have 80% of their output after 20 years. And the panel itself could even be guaranteed for 25 years. And that seems to be increasing all the time. They must have some quite clever lab technology to be able to give that guarantee. And really, I think a panel is going to work as long as it's has integrity and as long as water doesn't get inside. The inverters, it might be a little bit of a different story there, because inverters have MPPT, which is called a multiple power point tracker. So as I said before, very high voltage and low amps, and they're very good at that grow watt inverter that I showed can take voltage between 120 volts and 550. So below 120 volts, you're not going to get any power out of it. And then as soon as it gets above that, it's starting to drip feed into your consumer unit. The older that voltage range was definitely narrower on the older inverters. So you might find, I don't really have any figures about this, you might find that a newer inverter would start producing power before an older inverter. And I even saw a data sheet on an inverter this week that said it can start at 50 volts, which is very low. I don't know how many watts it's really putting out at such low voltage. But yeah, I mean, the efficiency rates are 95%, or power factor of 0.95. And the cables, another thing, the voltage drop on your cable between your inverter and your consumer unit is to be a higher diameter, thicker cable than you would normally have on a normal circuit. So the voltage drop needs to be below 1%. And so really your cabling, you're not really losing. Any conductor has resistance, and the bigger the cable, the lower the resistance and the more energy that's going to end up in a useful place, rather than dissipating as heat in a cable. So that's another important thing to check, that your installer's done that calculation correctly, because it's might be a way where they might try and save some money and supply a smaller cable.
Okay, excellent, thanks. And there was a question around whether panels are the only option. There was some actually quite a lot of press around sort of solar tiles at one point. Are they available? Are they practical? Can you get them in the UK?
I haven't had any direct experience of solar tiles. Obviously, Elon Musk with his Solar City came out with a lot of fanfare over solar tiles, and I thought it was quite exciting. But there are companies, I don't know of any that made in the UK. There's some that are coming out of Germany. I think they typically have one 30 centimeter square tile. There's one cell in the middle, so your efficiency is going to be, you're not covering every available square inch of your roof with a solar tile. But yeah, I live in hope for a product coming along that's going to be the same price as a tile, and it'll just be a no-brainer to fit that. You can go in Alibaba and buy solar tiles, and I do have a bit of a plan that I'd kind of like to buy some and make a little array and test them over time, so I can then recommend them if they work, because it would be great if solar tile becomes available, but I don't have any experience with them.
No, perfect. I'm just sort of seeing whether I've missed anything significant.
I saw a question of the
Mirrors.
environmental payback. I've talked probably a bit too much about the financial payback, but the carbon payback, or the energy that goes into a panel to produce. And obviously panels, I mean, they're silicon, boron, aluminium, there's some silver, there's plastics, there's not a huge amount of rare earth materials in a panel. But obviously a lot of panels are built in China, which is fueled by a lot of coal. I did read an academic paper a couple of years ago, and they thought it was 2.8 years environmental payback for a panel. Now I would think that's probably reduced a bit now, because the panels they're 30-meter high, the panels that I'm supplying, as opposed to the sort of the big ones. The older ones seem to be probably about 50 mil high. I would think that's probably reducing. As to the batteries, they now lithium phosphate batteries that the people seem most of the manufacturers, I'll say 80% are lithium phosphate, which don't have cobalt in them. But yeah, for mining those rare earth materials, it certainly does have an impact. And unfortunately, there's human rights issues in some countries, and the Congo DRC, particularly around the cobalt. And it certainly is a factor of the environmental damage, more than around the batteries, but I would say not around the panels. But the batteries are also guaranteed for 10 years. I would think the batteries that I'm fitting now would drop off in some capacity, maybe after 10, 15 years, but they're probably going to be in service in some sort of capacity for 20 years. So yeah, that's I think it's a difficult question to answer. And also at the moment we're not really recycling panels. There is a plant in France that has started recycling panels, but again, that seems to be another problem, that maybe they get shipped off to the third world under the pretense of we sell developing countries cheap panels, but I think in a way that it's another way of transferring our waste problem to other parts of the world. But generally, if you keep your panel on your roof for 30 years, hopefully after 20, 30 years, we'll have a lot less than that. We've got recycling centres that would put those materials back round to a circular economy.
Excellent, thanks. So then two very quick last questions then. Firstly, it's been very difficult to get quotes. I'm conscious that you're in the market, but I mean, how do you have a feel for how saturated the installers are at the moment in terms of workload versus sort of ability to deliver?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult. I can speak from my own experience that I'm beyond capacity. I'm quite a small startup, so how I'm going to scale that up, I don't know really at the moment. It's always a risk of scaling up too much. There's national companies. I think I think a lot of the national companies subcontract their work to electricians, and you would probably have a salesperson, a project manager, different people on site on the day. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. they maybe get you know, have a lot of resources, and then the smaller companies that there's a few in Hampshire. But yeah, I think just a question of speaking to different installers, and I do think that maybe some installers maybe cherry pick the easier jobs a bit rather than the harder jobs. But yeah, it's don't wait until the summer if you're thinking about putting solar panels on your house. You know, you just need to get on with it.
Excellent. Okay, and then one last question, which I think is a good one to finish on, which is sort of we talked a lot about sort of the panels. What is the typical cost of a 4 kilowatt sort of solar system?
I would say 4 kilowatt system. I'd say about probably 11,000 with a battery, and probably 8 or 9 without a battery.
Excellent.
Something like that. I've 1,800 per kilowatt installed. Does that tally up with what I just said? It depends. You know, there's a lot of factors: the scaffold, the roof, the materials, the labour. I probably, for every install, I'm probably spending at least a day on the paperwork as well. So it's a lot of compliance and a lot of stuff we have to work through that maybe people don't see.
Excellent. Wonderful. Okay, thanks. Well, I'm conscious we didn't answer everybody's questions, but many thanks for your time and for answering as many as we could. I'm very conscious of time now, so Patricia, I'm going to just quickly hand over you to wrap up, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I was going to go through our retrofit plan, but you introduced most of it at the start, so this will really not take very long at all. In fact, there's probably not much point in sharing the slides, but I'll just do it very quickly. Just bear with. So you've seen that one. Yes, Peter mentioned the various things that we've got on our website about home energy matters. So we've got a whole load of energy saving tips on the website, from simple things like changing your light bulbs, draft proofing your house, home energy controls, through to slightly more complicated things. We're also able to tell you about any grants and subsidies that are available to you, and there are a few, but they are limited. I'll not go through them now. And we can also tell you about obtaining an independent survey and whole house retrofit plan. So what's that? And again, very briefly, because Peter did touch on some of this earlier. The whole house retrofit plan is a document that basically describes the sorts of improvements that you could make to your home in the medium to longer term, focusing very much on the energy efficiency of your home, reducing your carbon emissions and your energy, but still maintaining a comfortable home. And we use a number of independent qualified experts, known as retrofit coordinators, to pull these reports together. So they come to your home to do a survey, looking at things like your insulation, ventilation, glazing, looking at the potential for the solar panels. So a bit like the paper-based exercise that Michael mentioned to us earlier, looking at the alignment on your roof as to what sort of size of panels you could get up there. And then ultimately getting your building ready for some sort of low carbon heating source, such as a heat pump. You can do this sort of thing independently, but if you come through either PeCAN or WinACC, we've got the same project running that's funded by the National Energy Foundation, then we can offer you some subsidised prices for these plans. And the cost ranges between £250 and £600. And that cost depends mostly on the size of your house. We also are able to give you a year's free membership of NEF's Superhomes Network and a Superhomes Design Assessment as well, which is a 5-star rating measuring the carbon efficiency of your home. And within the project, we've also got access to a retrofit coordinator who's employed by NEF, who can help with understanding quotes, assessing quotes, and helping you on your journey with your retrofit. And between now and probably the end of August, we've got some capital funding that if you can implement some of that retrofit work, there is some capital funding available to call on within the project. So Michael's talked a lot today about solar panels and batteries as well. They are usually the thing that most people are attracted to in terms of improving their homes, but there's lots of other things that we can do to improve our homes and reduce their energy consumption. So if investing in your home is something that you are thinking of doing, then do have a think about whether the whole house plan is would be useful to you. And if you want to get in touch, our website details and email are there on that last slide. So there's a whistle-stop tour. Sorry, it's a bit rushed. We can send you the recording afterwards. And if you are interested at all, I'm quite happy to have a one-to-one conversation with you about how it might be appropriate for your home.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm just trying to answer some of the questions on the chat there, if anyone's got any.
Well, what we can do, Michael, is we can maybe email across some of these questions, and we can follow up with the attendees afterwards if there's some common themes that haven't been answered yet.
Okay, yeah, I'm welcome to take any questions over email.
Lovely. All right.
And
well, go on.
I was going to say thank you very much to Michael for spending time with us today and going through the topic in such detail. It's a very interesting subject.
Thanks. Yeah, I could talk about it all night probably. It's just, yeah, I like talking about it, so it's all good.
Well, thanks again for your time, and thank you to everyone who's attended. I hope you find it useful, and yeah, if you need to find out any more about us, there's plenty on our website, PeCAN, petersfieldcan.org, or if you're in the Winchester area, there's similar information on the WinACC website, winacc.org.uk.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for listening.
Good night.
Okay, good night.